welcome once again to EWTN's Bookmark. Our guest author today joining us through the magic of television from Australia, from our EWTN Parusia Media studios, Charbel, Raish, author of How Islam Led Me Back to Christ, My Conversion Testimony. Always great to see you, my friend, and we're glad to call you a friend since we've known you for many, many years. In fact, you mentioned when you first came to EWTN in the book itself, right?
That's right. Yeah. Thank you, Doug. It is an honor and blessing to be here with you. And yes, it's been a few years, and I do mention in the book the partnership we have with Parusia and EWTN.
Right, exactly. So what's going on with the Catholic Church down there? Are things going well, or is at least apologetics and what you're involved in of high interest to people these days?
Yeah, it's interesting. With the pandemic like we've just had, many people asking questions about the faith. Why are we here? What is our purpose in life? And so they are turning to the church. Even though we had the lockdowns last year, I think we don't know what we have until we lose it, right? So people have really missed going to church. And so this year, the numbers at Easter were through the roof, and so it was overflowing. And even RCIA enrollments have increased this year. So we've also noticed at Parusia the increase of visitors to our website and inquiries in general. So thanks be to God, more people are inquiring about the Catholic faith.
Well, it's interesting because you talk about how Islam led you back to Christ. It wasn't that you were Islamic at one time and converted, right?
That's right. The key word there is back to Christ. So I am a baptized Catholic, but I left and came back. So and that's why I've used that title.
Well, let me ask you about that, because you said about the RCIA program. Where are the converts coming from in general?
Well, these days they're coming from what they call nuns or nothing, or their family heritage may be Catholic actually, but they've fallen away completely, not baptized, not confirmed, and they're coming back.
Right. You've got a great lineup of people who you've brought over the years, which we congratulate you of bringing a lot of great Catholic apologists from the United States, including the one and only Father Mitch Pacquiao, whose show you were on recently as well. But another is Father Deacon Howard Sivers, right? And in the beginning of the book here, in the foreword, he talks about the fact that in Charbel's case, God used the practice of Islam to have an impact on his life. And all profoundly relatable to the life experience of many Catholics today is what the book's about. But it's interesting because it not only had a profound impact on you, but ultimately it's had a profound impact on the church in Australia, because you've taken that and turned it into an apologetic.
Interesting, yeah. I mean, when you zoom out and look back at the whole situation, yeah, praise be to God, the impact. God's ways are not our ways. So life would have been very different if I followed down that line when I was that day in the mosque, and I thought I became a Muslim that day. But yeah, my Muslim friends really challenged me, and thanks be to God for them, because then it asked deeper questions that got me to search.
Right. What he said here I thought was good, I should have read, was the story is God the Father is never at a loss for creativity in making his will known to us. Again, your situation, and you talk about it in the book, and we can talk a little bit about how you came about, but the idea that God is always working, and we never know when the door is going to open, right?
That's right, yeah. And only when you look back at your life and what has happened, what doors open, what doors close, and pretty much you can see the hand of God in it, and you don't realize until after you've passed through. So looking back on my life, I praise God every day. Just the foundations I had, the upbringing that I had, and that's allowed me to be where I am today.
Now, I know you went to Catholic grammar school, but then you ended up going to a public high school that was close to your home because of money issues and things like that, which was a pretty interesting place, of which people be surprised in a sense of what the makeup of that school was. What was it?
Yeah, it was a melting pot of the world. 99% of the student body came from a non-English speaking background. Now that's in Australia, right? But this area, many immigrants would come, many refugees as well, and so it was just, like I said, a melting pot. Almost, dozens and dozens of different countries were represented in that school body.
Right, and also some interesting people. One was tied into a gang. Another guy was tied into a situation, I think the longest, rape commitment as far as sentencing. So it was an interesting bunch of fellows you were hanging around with. You got into sports with them, and you mentioned that your best friends were really either Muslim or Orthodox, so you really didn't have Catholic friends at the high school.
That's right, yeah. Because of my appearance, I have a Lebanese appearance, and they just assumed I was Muslim. And I didn't have any other Catholic friends at all of any culture. There was some, Armenian Orthodox, Greek Orthodox, even a Romanian Orthodox friend, but then the rest were either Islamic or some of the Polynesians as well were there, and they were probably born-again Christians as well. But no one was practicing in the early years, and based on their behavior, you could tell.
What's kind of interesting in reading the book about that high school is you've got a bunch of guys who seem to kind of not necessarily follow the law or the rules that well, but at the same time were devout in their Islam practice. Mm-hmm. How did that work, or how does that work?
Well, it's interesting because every year Ramadan comes around and they take Ramadan very seriously, where they fast for the whole month. Mm-hmm. And it's during that month, it's interesting that most Muslims take their faith very seriously. That they're praying, they're 5 times a day. They're actually reducing the amount of, crime as well. So in our area, the local police station, they have a stat where the amount of crime during Ramadan is decreased, and that's interesting because that means they are turning to God in that month, even though outside of that month they may fall away and stop behaving well. It's just, I think, this us and them mentality where Islam is completely foreign to, say, the Western culture, and that's where there's no real connection there. There's a sense that they need to, we are not of that faith, and so therefore they need to help us. And there's this indifference there, right. I think, looking back.
Right. You also said one of my teammates was a devout Muslim, was always asking me questions about Christianity, not to get answers, but to show me its flaws. It's also that idea that, and this is a salute to them, that they were interested, in a sense, in converting you to their religion. It was important enough to them to want you to be converted, which many Catholics, let alone Christians, don't really bother people these days.
That's right. Very good point. Right from my first year in high school, where they questioned me about why I wear a crucifix or all these other aspects of the Christian faith. And it was great. That's why I thank God every day for them, because they did drill down and get to the bottom of our faith. I couldn't answer them, and that's a real problem. I couldn't answer the reason why we call Jesus God or the Son of God, and that really confused me. And I didn't have any answers for them, and they kept drilling. And looking back, I think that really impressed me. One of the things was they took their faith seriously, and I didn't know any Catholic that took their faith seriously.
It's interesting, though, because when you kind of take on the apologetic later, and you have that discussion with that young man, and you kind of list the questions that went back and forth between the two of you, it's interesting how many, as much as they seem to know, there seems like a lot of things they don't know.
Absolutely. The misconceptions there's a longer list of misconceptions, and again, I don't blame them. They have been ill-informed, and that's why we need good formation, good education, and so I think we need to re-educate, almost re-evangelize Catholics, go back to basics, and get to the core of our faith. But so we can evangelize the world. Right. But of course, there's lots of misconceptions out there to our culture today.
You have a very interesting experience where you talk about the day at the mosque after you went back with the sheikh, and they wanted you to do the prayer, and you kind of did the prayer, and then you were supposed to go in a shower and come out with the gown on, or you had the gown on and take a shower to cleanse off your past, right? And then come out. Yes. But you had some sort of experience in that shower that stopped you from going forward with that. What was it?
Yeah, I heard as I was having that shower, now I've just did the Shahada prayer, I've just given my life to Allah and Muhammad, and I'm in the shower, and I had this urge to pray, and the only prayers I knew was the Our Father and the Hail Mary. And so I said one Hail Mary after the next, and it ended up being a decade of the Rosary. And it was on that 10th Hail Mary, I was putting the white gown on, and I heard this whisper, "Not yet, not yet." And I believe to this day that probably Our Lady, because I guess I was addressing her during the shower. And thanks be to God, I heard that, because I put my normal clothes back on. I didn't put the white gown on, and I didn't go all the way with the, I guess, the whole conversion ceremony, if you like. So thanks to Our Lady, I think she saved me at that point.
And then you talk about going home, and you said, I'm very confused. You were talking to your mom, as you say, Mum, is calling me. Yes. I feel like God's calling me a Muslim, Mom. She said, I thought it was interesting. She probably pointed right away. Go to the church and go ask Jesus if he wants you to be a Muslim.
That's right. My mum put it in front. Now, before that, she gave me a big slap on the face right across. I still feel it today.
Oh, really?
She's a Maronite Catholic mum who really. It's part of the culture, right? And from the Middle East, so there was that tension in the Middle East, Muslims and Christians. But for her to have her son say he just became Muslim really shocked her. But thanks be to God, she said what she said. She said, ask Jesus if he wants you to be a Muslim or a Christian. And whatever he tells you, I won't get in the way. So the fact that she gave me that option, I listened. If she didn't give me the option, I probably wouldn't have listened.
Right.
So as an 18-year-old rebel, I probably would have not listened to Mum. But the fact that she was open that Islam could possibly be true, or at least allow me to experience that, then I went. I walked to the church, and yeah, it was an amazing experience I had there too.
Or maybe she was sure it wasn't and just needed you to see that you got the right answer because she knew our Lord would give that to you.
I think so.
Right.
Yes, I agree.
Now, it was interesting. You talk about being there, and you talk about the whole salvation from Islam with the three questions that need to be answered. And you talk about seeing this little old lady, in a sense, lighting a candle. And you're starting to think, now, she looks like she should go to heaven, but based on what they're saying, she's not. And then followed that, something happened with the tabernacle with a black and white shadow. What was that?
Well, at the time I didn't know what it was, but now I've realized it is the Shroud of Turin. So the shadow on the door of the tabernacle, this face was there, and I looked away, looked back at it, and it wouldn't go away. Now, whether or not, and it was the way the light hit the tabernacle, and but whatever, it formed in my mind a face of Jesus, and it wouldn't go away. And then I heard that an inner voice, not through my ears, but just in my heart, Charbel, are you going to give up all that I've done for you? And I knew that to be the voice of Jesus. And my 18 years of life at the time flashed before me, and I remember hearing all these Christian miracles where Jesus would walk on water and heal the blind and the dumb and the lame, and I was thinking, okay, only the one true God could do that. And then I said, no, Lord. I called Jesus Lord for the first time, and I said, I'm not going to give you up. And that's when I could breathe, and this weight came off my shoulders. And I'm a Catholic. I'm going to remain a Catholic, and now I need to know why.
Right. Well, and so was that final statement, not only I am a Catholic, I'm going to remain a Catholic, but I need to know why. That's the beginning of you looking into apologetics?
Absolutely. That parish, out of all the parishes in the country, this particular parish, St. Michael's in Belfield, Sydney, had weekly apologetics. It was called Lumen, verum, apologetics. And every Friday night, they would have a guest speaker on. And so I would turn up to these, and lots of, as I say in the book, terms I've never heard before, like encyclical. That's not a word that I understood. Or transubstantiation, never heard that one before. Or even things to do with the councils, the Vatican Council, or other sort of terms that I just was over my head at the time. But during Q&A, I'd put my hand up and I'd ask questions. Why do we Christians believe in a Trinity? How do we describe it? How do we know that Jesus was both divine and human? How can we explain that? Did Jesus know who was God? How do we prove the resurrection? All these things. And I would, week after week, ask these questions. And thanks be to God, these guests would have answers. And I would go back and write them down and just keep building up my understanding of the faith in those early years.
And you talk about that experience in this particular chapter, chapter 3. But I thought it was interesting because you said, and you mentioned some names, I want to acknowledge the men who inspired me during this period in my life when I made that initial return to the church. Why were those people so important to you?
They were the very people I needed at that time in my life. Like I said, I didn't know any Catholics, any devout Catholics, particularly my age. And when I went back to church, having leaders like, at the time, Dr. Robert Haddad, who has been on this episode a while ago, and then David Obeid. These were the founders, and Arlette Bowen, the founders of Lumen, Verum, Apologetics. But then there was these other young adults there, and for the first time I came across young Catholics my age, and that inspired me too. So if it wasn't for them, I probably wouldn't have had that support, and so it would have been just me on my own. But finding these others, I felt at home in the Catholic Church, and that really helped. And I can't stress that enough. Having a good support around you really makes a big difference.
Now, you talk about that, and you talk about in chapter 4 the idea of longing to spread your faith. How did that come upon you? What was it that you thought instigated that in you?
I think it was a natural thing when you discover the truth. And it just blows your mind. You're thinking, wow, this is amazing. This infinite truth, it makes so much sense. And it was like a treasure, like Jesus talks about the treasure in the field. Do you bury it or do you share it? And so I didn't want to just keep this treasure, newly found treasure, to myself. I wanted to share it with others, and I couldn't help it but do it. It just was a natural response. And so I would tell people at work, I would tell people in all sorts of secular environments, and they knew I was definitely on fire for my faith at the time, so I just couldn't help but share the faith.
And one of the earliest inspirations for you, and he comments in the beginning of the book, was Scott Hahn and his audio cassettes, right?
That's right. Actually, you might like this, but my first experience of Scott Hahn, first of all, it was on a cassette. So I first heard him through a cassette. I wonder if our viewers would remember what cassettes were, but it was What Was the Covenant? That was the first CD or cassette. And I learned about the Trinity, and it just made so much sense, and I couldn't get enough of it. So every single day I would listen to a new cassette. And I thank my spiritual director at the time, Father Chris, who gave me that first cassette. And there we did Bible studies together and kept going. But he also invited me to his place to watch EWTN. And on EWTN was Scott Hahn and the Lamb's Supper.
Oh, okay,
and that
right.
Lamb's Supper series was phenomenal when it first came out. Right. So I watched that, and we got a group of guys together, and we sat down and would watch the Lamb's Supper on EWTN and take notes. And so then the first time I saw Scott Hahn was on EWTN. And that was, we're going back 20 years now. So
right.
Thanks be to God for EWTN.
That show with Jeff Cavins was made in 1996, the summer of '96. It was actually put together.
Yeah, Our Father's Plan was brilliant.
Our Father's Plan is the one I was thinking
yes,
of, but
I watched that
the
too,
Lamb's
yes.
Supper with his show, right? Exactly. Another early show. Well, interesting. You say in my debate with my Muslim friend, which I alluded to in chapter 5, you talk about. He said he was reading the Bible, and that we Christians should be reading the Bible correctly, as Jesus did not claim to be God there. And he talks about, you go back and forth, and you ask questions here, and where do you find this or where do you find that in Scripture? And I thought one of the things you said, where in the Bible does Jesus say, I am God, the Son of God, worship me? And I guess the point is he doesn't explicitly necessarily say that. You say, if we're to be consistent, we need to apply the same rules to the Quran. Where in the Quran does it say the Tawhid, which is there is only one God, Allah, and his prophet is Muhammad? I mean...
That's right. The point there is we can't enforce the terminology. It's a bit of a trap. So we know as Christians that the Gospels are crystal clear. Jesus claimed to be equal with the Father. He claimed to be divine, and that's why he was killed on the cross. And if he didn't make it clear enough, then he wouldn't have been in trouble. But he got into trouble at the synagogue. We know the scene when he read from the Scriptures, and he read a prophecy from Isaiah, and then he said to everyone there, before your very hearing, the Scripture is fulfilled. And they knew what he was doing. He was making himself equal to that prophecy as the Messiah, and they wanted to stone him and throw him off the edge. But throughout the Gospels, it's crystal clear that Jesus made himself equal to God. But what Islam is trying to do, and Muslims in general, are trying to say, they're creating the rules here. They're trying to say, I want to see in the Gospels that Jesus says, I am the Son of God, worship me. Well, okay, it does say that, but it doesn't say it in that order that you want it to be.
Right.
And so then let's be consistent. And every Muslim is required to say the Shahada prayer, or the Tawhid, and And in the Quran, it's not found right through. It's in components,
Right.
but not as it is from start to finish. And so we could apply the same thing back to them. And so we don't impose on God how you want to say something. God will reveal himself the way he wants to. And so when we discover that, there's no mistake. Jesus is the Messiah. He was the prophet who was prophesied from all the way back in Genesis, right through the Old Testament. And as Archbishop Fulton Sheen says, 456 prophecies of the Messiah, born of a virgin in Bethlehem. The time and the place was predicted. I mean, these are no coincidences.
Right.
So much evidence is there to show that Jesus is who he said he was.
It was interesting, too, because at least in one of the interpretations that are out there, the idea is that, well, Jesus might have been on the cross, but then he either fell asleep and he really didn't die, or he was replaced by Judas on the cross. I wasn't aware of that one.
That's a very common understanding among Muslims. So if anyone out there has Muslim friends, ask them what happened when Jesus was on the cross. So there is an understanding that Jesus was on the cross, but he didn't die on the cross. Judas replaced him. And so it just sort of happened where Jesus actually was assumed, not ascended, but assumed. So taken up to heaven. So Jesus didn't die. However, Judas was replaced. But everyone on the ground thought it was Jesus. So they thought they were seeing Jesus, but it wasn't actually Jesus. It was Judas. And my discussion with my Islamic friend was, well, okay, that's an interesting understanding. Why was he on the cross in the first place? And that's something I haven't had a satisfactory answer yet. There's no answer for that. If I encourage people, if they want to go and see in the Quran, Surah 4:157 does describe this whole part of Jesus being on the cross. I asked my friend, why is that in the Quran? And he said, just to prove that Jesus didn't die on the cross. I said, so why is he on the cross in the first place? What did he do wrong? I haven't had an answer since.
Interesting. Also, you speaking of answers, at one time you thought you might have a vocation. You do, obviously, but to the priesthood.
Yeah, that's right. So because of my newly found faith, I was listening to Scott Hahn cassettes, watching EWTN, and going to church. Now, I went to confession for the first time since my first confession. I started to go to Mass on Sundays. I went to, then I started going to daily Mass. That was another sort of conversion, if you like. Reading scripture, studying, and I just fell in love with God. The more I knew him, the more I loved him. The more I loved him, the more I wanted to get to know him. And it just was a spiral. I wanted to keep getting deeper and deeper in my faith, to the point where my friends noticed. They said, you never used to be religious, but now you can't get out of the church. Do you want to be a priest? And I thought, maybe that's a sign from God. Maybe I should listen to that. And so I approached the bishop. Actually, it was Cardinal Pell.
Really?
Cardinal
Okay.
George Pell at the time. He was Archbishop of Sydney. And I first needed to know whether or not I belonged to the Maronite church or the Roman Rite, because I didn't really go to church. But he said, no, you are a Maronite. So I then had to go to the Maronite bishop, and then he accepted me, and I went into the year of discernment, which, funny enough, was with the Archdiocese of Sydney anyway. So I was getting formation with them. So that was in 2003. And I had a great year then. And then I went to Lebanon and studied in the Maronite tradition, so Syriac, a little bit of Aramaic and the Maronite spirituality. And that was great too. So I left the seminary not from any bad terms. I actually really enjoyed it. But it was this calling for marriage that never left me. And I guess I had to be true to that. I had this, when it's your vocation, when you have this peace. I was missing that peace when in prayer. And that inner peace was not there. And my spiritual director said, it's pretty clear you have a vocation to the married life. So I took that. Although I want to continue on, but married life was really, I had to be honest with myself.
And where did you meet your future wife?
Funny enough, at a church called St. Charbel's. And the church was the very church I was baptized and confirmed in. So one that I left early on in my life, and I came back all these years later. And they had these faith formation nights there where guest speakers would come, and she was there, and we built a friendship, and from there, I asked her to get to know me more, and thanks be to God, within couple of years we got married at that very church, 1st of July 2006.
Right. And you've been married a number of years, obviously, with that the case, and you have a fair number of children, right?
Praise be to God. Yeah, we're blessed with 8 children, one in heaven, and there's one, sorry, I should say 9, because my wife is expecting in July, so please pray for her.
Will do. Let me ask you about your plans for Parusia Media coming out of the post-COVID experience and your plans for expansion.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, Parusia was born out of a need to spread the faith, and so when I wanted to share the faith personally, it went to the next level when we formed Parusia, and thanks to COVID, everything's really exploded as far as the reach online. Over 116 countries now are in touch with us, and we're doing a lot more virtual events, virtual pilgrimages, virtual conferences. We're also preparing for a Parusia Academy, which is something that we're very excited about. We've been working on for a while, and that's going to bring together some of the best American professors and Australian ones too. And we hope that adults can take advantage of that, accessible to anybody. So look out for that. And I encourage anyone to visit parusiamedia.com to learn more about what we're doing, because there's always something new. We have a podcast as well, and some free articles, free videos there, and a YouTube channel. So there's a lot going on at the moment. But thank God, I pinch myself every day that I'm doing this work. I just living the dream right now, and it doesn't feel like work. It is a mission, and I thank God for it.
Well, we thank God for you as well and the wonderful work you're doing with your wife, your family, and the whole Parusia Media group down in Australia, working with us as well. Charbel, Raish, How Islam Led Me Back to Christ, My Conversion Testimony, available through our EWTN religious catalog, EWTNRC.com. Make sure you check it out. Check us out next time on Bookmark. Thank you.